to the Shame-Free Zone. I've got a very special guest today. Her name is Dr. Martha Tara Lee. We've known each other for a few years now, even though we're separated by an ocean. She's in Singapore. I'm in California. And Martha, thank you so much for joining me in the Shame-Free Zone.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you. And I actually want to tell the viewers just a little bit about you. So I'm going to read your bio here. Dr. Martha Tara Lee is the founder and clinical sexologist of Eros Coaching. She's a certified sexologist with a doctorate in human sexuality. That's pretty heavy stuff there. She provides sexuality and intimacy coaching for individuals and couples, and she conducts sexual education workshops and speaks at public events. Now, I gotta say, I am really interested in catching up with you around Singapore. So can you first help us understand why you would decide to go into sexology? What was that about for you?
Yes, I have always been fascinated with sex. I started off not wanting to be bad in the bedroom, and I soon realized that I was the only person that I knew who was positive around sex. And I was surrounded by friends who had difficulties with sex, painful sex, low sex drive, hated sex. And I was just wondering why I was so different from them.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Did you ever answer that? Why are you so different?
I think there was some seeds that were planted that made me just that little bit more sex positive from other people, such as my mom not shaming me when I told her that I masturbated. I was 5 when I started masturbating. I didn't know what it was. I thought I was going to die.
No, wait, slow down. Why? Okay, you start masturbating when you're 5, and you thought you were going to die. What does that mean? Was the experience so overwhelming, or what?
Because when you have your orgasm, your heart is pounding. So I thought that can't be right for a 5-year-old.
Oh.
So I went to my mom and I showed her and I said, "Mom, I have to show you something." So I showed her, and then she's like, "Oh yeah, that's normal." I was like, "Yeah, but then my heart is like beating," and she's like, "Yeah, that's okay."
Oh, what a great mother. Oh my God, you're so lucky. You had such an awesome mother. My mother, so first of all, she told me, wash down there. First of all, that kind of tells you where this conversation is going. Wash down there really quickly. Because you don't want to offend God. We're very religious. And then when I was about 11 and my breasts started to grow, I noticed that when I touched them, I would get a strange little tickling sensation. And I went to my mom and I asked her about it. And she says, "What are you touching your breast for?" So you are so fortunate. Anyway, so you have a very sex positive mom. Then what happens as you get older? What?
Oh, I wouldn't call her that sex positive. She didn't really teach me, but she didn't explain. She didn't say things in a negative way. So, yeah. So
Oh, she didn't shame you, but she also didn't teach you anything.
she didn't really say much.
Hmm.
A lot of it was, "Oh, you'll know more when you grow up."
Oh.
But I think it was because of those little moments I felt that sex was something to look forward to when I grow up. And so when I did grow up, it was not it was good. I had many positive experiences with my partners, and even though I was quite conservative, it wasn't as challenging, as difficult as it is for my friends. So when I started to do volunteer work, I started to do volunteer counseling and realized that I was good at it. I realized I wanted to specialize in sex counseling because sex was never talked about in really positive ways in Singapore.
Yeah, so
So
really, as I understand it, you were being cutting edge. for Singapore culture. Were you the first certified sexologist in Singapore?
Yes, uh, I I was the only sexologist with a doctorate in human sexuality. There were other people who called themselves sexologists, but actually medical doctor. Yeah.
Right. Right. And the medical profession actually can be, a lot of times they haven't examined their shame. So they may know technical things like reproductive health and maybe how to treat anorgasmia or erectile dysfunction or vaginismus or something like that, but they don't really deal with people's emotions. Is that
Mm,
of course,
mm.
I haven't been to Singapore, so I'm asking. That's the way it is here in the US. Is that the way it is
Yeah.
in
Yes.
Singapore?
Yeah. So there are people who call themselves sexologists, even from India. Actually, their perspective is that of the medical approach. And so then really what they're doing is giving sexual medicine. So not everybody, even though they may have the same title, their approach will be quite different.
Ah, right. Right. And since you became the first certified sexologist in Singapore, has your career arc inspired others to join you? Are there more sexologists today in Singapore than there were when you first became?
There are more people who have similar qualifications in Singapore, but none of them are Asians.
Okay.
And then those people who don't have similar qualifications, say like in Tantra, calling themselves sex coach, there are more people having conversations around sexuality in Singapore, or even just counselors or social workers, people who are advocating for GLBTQ rights.
Right, right.
Uh,
But that's not the same as
yeah.
having the qualifications that you have. Do you did you feel like there was any pushback, or were people suspicious of you? Or did you get shamed when you went down this career arc? I'm just wondering how it was for you.
Yes. When I first started my practice, I didn't know what to expect because there was nobody that I could talk to or get supervision from, specifically in Singapore. And I was very surprised. I guess I shouldn't be, but I still was because I didn't know what to expect. I was surprised by the amount of sexual objectification and harassment that I was getting
Wow.
from men, people who thought that I was giving massage or I was the same as a sex worker. People asking me to watch them and their partner have sex. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
You know, I
so
I don't have a doctorate like you do, but I am certified as a sexologist through the American College of Sexologists. And when I first moved out of the San Francisco Bay Area into little Nevada County, I encountered a lot of people who I stopped calling myself a sexologist in this area because people freaked out. It's a little more conservative part of California. And I was really surprised at the assumptions and the prejudices and the fear. So much fear, like, what does a sexologist do? And I'm like, well, look it up. It says somebody who studies sexology or studies sex. But maybe you could tell us, what exactly do you do, since people have had so many misconceptions?
yeah, I work with people with all kinds of sexual questions or challenges. And it's not just sex, it can be their sexuality, their communication, sexual expression with their partner, even being able to be comfortable with hugs and touch sometimes always comes up. So yeah, individuals, couples with all kinds of relationship, sexuality related challenges. So yeah, basically private sessions. Yeah,
But
without touch,
but
without
yes, no
touch.
touching. Exactly. That's been I tell people, a sexological body worker will touch, and a sex therapist or a sex surrogate. But a sexologist or a sex educator is there to dispense information and and teach healing modalities that you go home and practice in the privacy of your home. You don't actually do it in the office. Is that
That's
also?
right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about sexuality in Singapore? Because I know, I'll tell you, here in California, a lot of the things that I encounter are men who are perhaps so um, masturbating to pornography so much that they kind of have lost the ability to have sex with a human being. I work with women who are not enjoying sex and worried about how to tap into their orgasmic pleasure. But by and large, most of my job is really helping people with their sexual shame, helping them to feel better about who they are, and normalizing whatever problems they might have so that they don't feel like they're odd or they're different. I'm just wondering, for you, what kind of things do you work with your Singapore clients? What comes up for them?
Yes. Uh, so even though Singapore is one of the most economically prosperous Asian countries, it it is also a hub for a lot of people coming through Singapore. So I'm very fortunate that besides working with Singaporeans, I get to work with all kinds of Asians and, of course, people of Western descent. And the most common issue that comes up again and again in my work is vaginismus or unconsummated marriage. So vaginismus is a condition that happens when there's psychological fear of penetration, of pain, and makes it difficult or impossible for penetration to happen. And often there is a lot of pain. So that is actually the number one issue people come to me for. Also work with people with penises with erectile difficulties, premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation, and difficulties having sex with their partner. Like you said, they masturbate a lot by themselves, and they needed some coaching around bridging how that is like by themselves and how that would be like with the partner. So yeah, pretty much the whole spectrum of sexual dysfunctions. And so what I feel is very different from my colleagues in the US is I just work with the most inhibited people and for so long.
So, well, now, okay, maybe you can clear up some mythologies or some things I've read about in very respected journalistic essays, whether that was on the New York Times or some other portal. But I was under the impression that there was actually kind of a trend in Asian cultures, an unfortunate trend of becoming more and more asexual and less interested in sex. And when I say unfortunate, I'm coming from the perspective of a sexologist and really thinking that sex is an important part of our humanity. But I'm not in any way wanting to try to disparage people who are asexual, because that's a valid choice. But if you start to see a whole continent or nation kind of go in that direction, you start to wonder what's going on. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Mm. I feel that a lot of the asexuality is with people from Japan. I feel that outside of Japan, they call it grass eating, grass eating man or woman. That's actually a
Yes.
real expression.
I know, I know it is. I've looked it up. Yes, it is.
Yeah, grass
Grass eating
eating,
boys.
yeah, versus meat eating. So yes, I think asexuality is still not as public or prevalent in Singapore or in Asia outside of Japan. I'm sure that there are people who identify as asexual. However, it's not really that much spoken about. Or even people who identify as non-binary. what I find is being featured a lot in the media in recent times is violation of people in public, like upskirt videos, and in Telegram, exchanging sexy pictures of women, talking them in ways that are demeaning. And 2 days ago, I was interviewed in Sunday Times about a locker room talk, men talking about women in disparaging ways, and seemingly making compliments about their colleagues about the way they look, but it's a form of microaggression about, you know, you're just reducing somebody who wants to be treated as a professional and an equal into just an object that's pretty to look at.
Right.
So that is the kind of conversations that we are having.
I would really, can we talk about that just a little bit more? Because I'm working on a book about consent for long-term relationships. So hashtag me too. How is that in Singapore? Is there an awareness around that? Is there a movement around that?
Yeah. When I run workshops and I talk about consent, I often have my participants saying things like, but she's my wife, why should I be asking for permission to touch her? What? You mean I need to ask for permission every time? That's not sexy. So consent is almost as if, we're married now, I own you.
Right.
And
I mean, wrong, but yes.
Yeah. And
yes.
it's actually really difficult for some people to speak up in the bedroom about what they need. And what's even more common is a lot of couples, they have sex but they don't talk about it. So it's not uncommon.
Oh my God. Well, that's happening over here too, by the way. I have in California, I would think that people are more enlightened than this in 2020, but no, I've definitely worked with wives and girlfriends who think they owe their male partner. And I'm specifically talking about cisgender heterosexual relationships because that dynamic really shows up in those relationships, in my experience. So it's like I owe him sex, or on the other side, the male thinking that his female partner owes him sex. It's interesting because I don't encounter it so much with women believing that their male partner owes them sex. So I'm sensing that we still have this what I would consider a sexist burden, where women are still on some kind of a subconscious level still seen as property by people who are otherwise incredibly sophisticated and enlightened and progressive, and it's kind of shocking. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's almost as if in every other frontier, every other area of our lives, we are not afraid to ask questions, get educated, attend classes. But somehow, because sex is linked to our emotions and our private lives, it needs to be private, stay private, and somehow miraculously, just because we want to, it will happen easily, and it should happen spontaneously. So that causes a lot of difficulties with people who just don't know how, and their desires is not translating into action. And then the shaming and the blaming and the self-judgment that happens all the time. It's really, really prevalent, and there's a lot of suffering that I'm seeing in people. And I have people who are shocked by the kind of clients that I tend to see. That's also to understand the kind of people who come to me for private sessions and the kind of people who might sign up for a workshop will be very different. It took me a long time to realize my clients are not coming for workshops, and the people who come for my workshops actually never want to be my client.
So true, isn't it? That's been my experience as well.
Yeah, it took me a while to realize this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand that. I really do. I'm curious, and fair warning here, since I am working on a book on hashtag Me Too in the context of long-term relationships. What do you? I might quote you is what I'm saying. Um, can you help me understand how do you deal with that whole idea that somehow or another sex is owed, that you kind of
Mm,
own your
mm, mm,
partner's
mm.
body? How do you help people dislodge themselves from that framework?
Very gently, very gently, very gently, because I'm a woman, and in cisgender relationships, usually the man is the one who thinks this way, and because I'm also in a female body, I have to do this very gently. Um, so I might I might need to be as explicit as to say she is a separate person with her own needs, wants, and desires, and there's no way you can guess, and you definitely don't want to do second guessing and pretend or try to be a psychic. So if you're not sure how they are feeling, then it's important to just ask. So I might start off with that.
And I'm thinking that you said that one of the you have a lot of clients who have vaginismus, and I'm just wanting to check this out with you. Um, Obviously, some people are treated with dilators, and I don't know, perhaps you're using dilators too, but it seems to me that you're also approaching women's um, psychological framework when it comes to vaginismus. And I'm just wondering, how do you approach that? And is it possible that some of the cultural attitudes um, that say that the female's body is owned, is property, could that be contributing to the high rate of vaginismus that you're seeing?
Yeah, most of the vaginismus cases that I have are primary vaginismus, which means that they are virgins, they've never had penetration. And uh, it is not one issue, it is many, many issues. So for somebody who is coming to me with primary vaginismus, I often have them not understanding about sexual anatomy. So they don't know where's the vagina. Some of them may have never masturbated, may have never had an orgasm. And now they have all this pressure of having sex after marriage. So they don't try to have sex before marriage. And then they realize that they are not able to have sex. So sometimes it's a big shock to them.
Mm.
And to have to deal with that shock and then the pressure of having sex and not having a voice in the bedroom, not feeling that they can speak up and to say stop, and to try and to physically not be able to do it is can be very puzzling for some of them. So they come with varied kinds of emotions and questions. And so it's not just vaginismus, it's actually the lack of sex education, it's actually the lack of sexual communication, it's the lack of being able to assert themselves in the bedroom, and as you mentioned, like you are now an extension of somebody's property. So there's a lot of self-directed shame and guilt and blame that of course doesn't help the situation. So there are many, many facets of it. In some ways, it feels like firefighting, and and everybody comes in with a slightly different profile. Even though I have worked with thousands of people by now over the last 11 years,
Yeah.
so I have to be very gentle and culturally sensitive because where they come from does make a difference.
Yes, and that's and I think what I'm getting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm hearing that there is a cultural overlay in Singapore that you're having to overcome as a sexologist to help, particularly cisgender males and females, communicate around consent in a way that makes sense to them, because there's kind of some assumptions that you just, I guess, kind of submit to the sex that's
Mm.
asked for by your male partner. I'm not sure. So maybe you could just say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I feel that um, they haven't had much sex education or modeling in their lives. So it's actually challenging to put it all on them and say they should know, they should. A lot of times, if this is um, of course, maybe they're marrying their first girlfriend. So what can happen is they really haven't had a lot of experience, and so they really just don't know how. So then when it comes to their partner also is subjected to a lot of the cultural imposition, whether it's cultural, whether it's religious, on what a woman should be doing.
Right.
That doesn't help.
Yeah, right. Well, it doesn't help in the United States either. I find, of course, I've got clients from around the globe, but predominantly they're from the United States. And I find that we have, they're not overt. So there's like, nobody feels like they've got the right to say, I own my partner and they owe me sex. It's more like, kind of like a subconscious assumption, that's kind of driving the engine, as it were. And when you're talking about that lack of communication, I have found it so astounding how long people could be having sex with each other for 20 years and never had a conversation about it.
Yes.
And that's astounding to me, because for me, I love talking about sex with my partner, and I can't imagine not talking about sex. Do you have found ways to help couples start talking, and what are some of the obstacles that they have to navigate in order to be able to talk about sex?
Yeah, for them to come and see me, usually there is a problem, and so they really feel a lot of embarrassment. So for me to be so comfortable talking about sex and to normalize it for them, so they might be cringing, they might be giggling, they might be just embarrassed. So it's just holding space and reassuring them that I'm not judging them, that I'm here to support them. And what has happened is, through talking to me individually or as a couple, and through discussing it, they realize they're having conversations that I'm facilitating that they have never had. And hopefully that begins to peel down the layers, and it just becomes easier and easier. And it's not that it's impossible, it's that they just haven't had the practice of discussing the topic of sex. So yeah, so I agree with you, it's not uncommon to have clients who are having sex 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, who never had a conversation about, how am I doing? Am I pleasing you? Would you like to try something else? They don't talk about things like that at all.
Yeah,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and sometimes it might never even occur to that person, because as long as it's okay, don't fix something that's not broken. So I often find opposites, like an introvert with an extrovert, a morning person and a night person, a talkative person and a quiet person. And then there's a person who speaks in routine. And that's the reason why it doesn't even occur to them, because they're happy, they're okay. And sex needs not be something that's just okay. It can be something that's great.
Yes, exactly. You and I are both on a mission to free people of shame and to help them have ecstatic sex lives, not mediocre ones. So, and I think you have something that you call orgasmic yoga as one of the things that you offer to help people experience great sex. Can you tell us a little bit about orgasmic yoga?
Yes. So Orgasmic Yoga is my second book. And after my first a book, that is like the book that everybody says you must publish a book. It was a compilation of all the essays that I wrote. And so that was like the proper book. And having done that, I really wanted to do the second book on orgasmic yoga. And there was a lot of, as you can imagine, it's very, very radical as well. Besides being a sexologist, it's very radical because It's all about pleasure. And and it contains many practices around pleasure. So I couldn't find a publisher. I had to I published it myself.
Oh my God, that's
And
terrible.
I was in so much paralysis that whole year. I was trying to get that book going. I couldn't get out of bed. I was having birthing pains, because
Oh,
there was also a lot of, who the hell am I to talk about orgasmic yoga? Who do I think I am? And also the backlash from a culture that's so conservative, like yeah, anyway. So orgasmic yoga is essentially an embodiment practice
well,
of pleasuring yourself for 30 minutes for it's a recommended 30 minutes for 30 days. What this does, it helps to free up the neural pathways in your body,
yeah.
and it's actually encouraging you to pleasure yourself in different ways. So not the same way, different ways, because when you do different things, you feel different things. And when you are trying something new, it's going to be uncomfortable and it may not work. However, orgasmic yoga is not about the goal of an orgasm, it's about the sensation of starting to get yourself sexually awakened and sexually stimulated and just sexually more free. So a lot of people are masturbating quickly, or even you mentioned, like your mom say, clean yourself quickly.
Right.
So there's this layer of let's just get it over and done with, and it is reduced to something that's functional. So actually, a lot of people are masturbating in very functional ways, and are not giving themselves permission to really feel.
Mm, mm,
So orgasmic yoga is recommending 30 minutes to just stay with yourself, because the first 5-10 minutes we do go into let's get it over and done with. And then you start to have some time to drop into your body and really feel. And when you give yourselves an extended period of time to pleasure and to feel and to keep going on, even and not rush, what's going to happen is you can drop into meditative states very, very easily.
yeah.
So this is
Wow.
when masturbation becomes a form of meditation.
Astounding. I teach, well, I mean, it's similar but different than something that I teach, because I teach a masturbation, a sacred ritual around masturbation, and it has the same goal to help people slow down, have a very sensuous relationship with themselves. And then I'm usually asking them to not think about sex while they're touching themselves. I'm wanting them to actually kind of affirm the things that they want to draw into their lives. So it's this little touch of sex magic in there.
Sex magic, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like really, really using that openness that happens when we are in an orgasmic state and when we're pleasured, where we can start to dream and pull in our creativity. So anyway, I'm intrigued. I haven't done orgasmic yoga yet, but I can't wait to try it, because I've been doing Kundalini yoga for about 10 years now, and it's had a hugely beneficial impact on my sex life because of learning how to work with raising those energies. So I'm trying to picture what the asanas must look like while you're doing orgasmic yoga. It sounds very exciting. Can you tell us the names again of the first book? Because I want to make sure people can find that book as well.
The first book is called Love, Sex, and Everything in Between.
Mm, beautiful title.
It's a compilation of essays. And then the
Yeah.
second is Orgasmic Yoga. I have 4 books. The third one is From Princess to Queen. So it has to do with my personal life. I talk about my mom in the book. So
Oh,
each chapter is starts with a story, and then it ends with some suggestions for people. So
yeah.
like masturbation, how might you start to masturbate? So I'll start with like my masturbation story.
Yeah.
And the fourth book is a vulva book, an Asian vulva photo book. Yeah.
They're beautiful, just beautiful. And I know that you've also got, of course, I'm gonna list all that below the video so people can find it readily. But what you've got a conference or something, or is it a workshop series that's coming up that you can tell us about?
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to be organizing Love Abilities. I am organizing Love Abilities. It's a virtual sexuality and disability festival for 5 days. And each day we have 8 or 9 different sessions. We have 50 presenters, 29 sessions over 5 days. It's all on Zoom. And anybody can register for it. You can apply for a free ticket, and the recordings will be available for 30 days.
That's
So
awesome. And,
yeah.
and I'll be happy to list that below here as well. I want to tell you something that you may not know. You're actually one of my sex heroes.
Oh,
I think you're just so brave to go up against the kind of sexual harassment that you went up against, and also a conservative culture that may not have been quite ready for Dr. Martha Tara Lee. You are really just so courageous, and what you're doing to help heal sexuality in Singapore, and of course in so many other nations as well, because I'm sure you have a large practice that goes beyond Singapore, just like I do. But I just really appreciate you.
oh, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing how I survived so long. 11 years is a long time. I went through a lot of ups and downs and questioning, like, why am I doing this? And it's essentially putting my stick in the ground and saying, I will not move. It's also not about being a sex positive person. It's also not about imposing sexual values and telling people how to have sex. It's really about just creating that opportunity for people to feel safe, to feel that if they want support, I am here. And over the years, letting my work evolve and finding different creative avenues to help people, but also express myself. So that's why I have 800 videos on YouTube now. I rather do something.
Your YouTube channel is amazing.
I rather do something than to do nothing. And I think that comes from way beyond about being famous or making money. It's about, I feel, creating a legacy to support people. And I have had imposter syndrome, like, oh, there are so many amazing sex educators in the world. Who the hell am I? However, I feel that because there are so few Asian sex educators, that I must put myself out there. And even from these free videos, I never know who I can help.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I write books, articles, videos. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your vulnerability. I don't know that there is any human being that doesn't occasionally suffer from imposter syndrome. So that just says you're human, and you absolutely have amazing credentials. So I'm
Thank
very
you.
honored that you shared your perspective and your wisdom here in the shame-free zone. And I'm also just really grateful for our friendship.
Oh, thank you. I've admired your work for a long time, even before I knew you, because I read your book, and I just really admired you and your courage. And I've been enjoying your newsletters for years and years because of the quality that you bring to your work. Is inspiring. So even though I don't say it much, I do admire you a lot.
Yeah. Well, I feel the love between us, Martha. Thank you so much.